Before we begin, if you are the kind of historian who values primary evidence over legend and long-term patterns over surface-level facts, subscribe to After the Sirens and leave a comment with the site that shocked you most as we go along. This channel exists for people who want to understand history as infrastructure, strategy, and consequence, not trivia. What you are about to hear is not speculative history. These are real World War II installations that remain restricted today, not because of myth, but because of unresolved danger, political sensitivity, and buried technologies that governments still do not want disturbed. World War II did not end cleanly in 1945. In many places, it simply went underground. Across Europe, Asia, and the polar regions, entire military complexes were abandoned in place, sealed off, or quietly repurposed, leaving behind sites that remain off-limits decades later. These bases were not ordinary barracks or airfields. They were command centers, experimental weapons hubs, intelligence vaults, and last-resort fortresses built for total war. Their continued closure tells us something uncomfortable. The war's infrastructure still poses risks that modern governments are unwilling to resolve publicly. How secrecy during World War II created bases that were never meant to be reopened. Many of the most restricted World War II sites were designed with a single expectation: no retreat. Engineers planned them to function under siege, nuclear threat, or complete isolation. This meant deep burial, self-contained power systems, chemical storage, and in some cases deliberate demolition triggers. When the war ended faster than expected, these bases were abandoned without full decontamination or documentation. Today, entering them risks exposure to unexploded ordnance, unstable tunnels, toxic residue, or classified materials that were never recovered. A practical lesson for modern survivalists and historians is understanding how secrecy shapes architecture. Governments still use the same principles when building hardened facilities today. Studying these World War II bases reveals how modern black sites are likely structured, what risks they contain, and why abandonment does not mean safety. Why do Nazi underground complexes remain sealed despite decades of exploration technology? Well, Germany constructed hundreds of subterranean facilities during the final years of the war, many of them built using forced labor under, frankly, impossible conditions. Some complexes, like the massive underground aircraft factories in the Harz Mountains, were only partially mapped after the war. Others, however, still remain officially restricted because no authority can truly guarantee their structural stability. Even now, collapsing tunnels, flooded chambers, and sealed rooms filled with unknown materials still exist. In several documented cases, post-war survey teams actually encountered chemical agents stored in glass containers that had degraded, but crucially not neutralized. This is precisely why areas around certain former German installations remain closed, even to archaeologists. From a practical standpoint, it really demonstrates how chemical weapon storage creates a multi-generational danger. Anyone studying disaster preparedness or civil defense, can learn from these failures when considering the long-term storage of hazardous materials. The Arctic bases, those that were abandoned and, quietly erased from public maps. Few people realize that Nazi Germany and the Allies both built secret bases above the Arctic Circle. One German weather and intelligence station in the far north, for instance, was abandoned after its crew became critically ill from contaminated food. The site, as it happens, remained untouched for decades because of its extreme isolation and the presence of wartime equipment just frozen in place. Even today, access is, limited due to unexploded ammunition fuel caches preserved in permafrost and the strategic sensitivity of Arctic territories. Climate change is now exposing these sites again, forcing governments to confront dangers they hoped would stay buried. For modern survival thinkers, This really highlights how environmental conditions can preserve threats indefinitely and why long-term planning must account for changing climates. Why Japan's island fortresses are still restricted zones. Across the Pacific, Japan built elaborate tunnel systems on strategic islands, some extending for miles beneath volcanic rock. Many of these tunnels were sealed after the war with soldiers still inside. In certain locations, unexploded naval shells, chemical stockpiles, and unstable volcanic geology make entry extremely dangerous. In some cases, governments restrict access not only for safety, but to prevent disturbing war graves. These sites remain contested spaces between archaeology, ethics, and national memory. Understanding this tension is crucial for historians who study conflict zones, and for survivalists who want to understand how terrain can be weaponized and denied long after fighting ends. You know, there are Allied intelligence sites that never officially stopped operating. Not all off-limits World War II bases, interestingly enough, belong to defeated nations. In fact, several Allied intelligence and signals facilities were absorbed into Cold War networks and were never fully declassified. Locations used for code-breaking, surveillance, and early electronic warfare often retained classified infrastructure well into the late 20th century. The lesson here really is continuity. Wars end, but intelligence systems evolve. These sites show us how wartime secrecy becomes peacetime power. For anyone interested in modern surveillance, emergency communications, or resilient networks, studying these transitions offers insight into how governments maintain hidden capabilities across generations. So, how do modern explorers apply historical knowledge without crossing legal or ethical lines? Serious historians and researchers, they do not trespass into restricted zones. Instead, they study declassified blueprints, wartime logistics records, and satellite imagery to reconstruct how these bases functioned. This approach, honestly, allows analysis without physical risk. Survivalists can apply similar methods by studying historical infrastructure to understand shelter design, redundancy, and resource storage without attempting dangerous entry. Steps include comparing wartime construction manuals with modern civil defense standards, analyzing how supply chains were protected under bombardment, and identifying why certain designs failed catastrophically. This, honestly, turns forbidden history into usable knowledge rather than just reckless curiosity. Why these places remain off-limits and, why that matters today. The continued closure of World War II bases is not about hiding the past. It's about acknowledging that some technologies, materials, and decisions outlast the people who made them. These sites remind us that war leaves physical consequences that simply cannot always be cleaned up or explained away. For historians, they are warnings written in concrete and steel. For survivalists, they are lessons in long-term risk. World War II is often framed as finished history. These bases, though, prove otherwise. If this deep dive added real value to your understanding of how war infrastructure shapes the modern world, go ahead and subscribe to After the Sirens, share this video with fellow researchers, and leave a comment with the site you want us to investigate next. Serious history deserves serious attention, and this channel exists to keep it that way.